Hey, what's going on, working class hustlers? Thanks for joining us once again. I have Dillon, the co-founder of the software Aura, and we're going to talk about strategies as we delve into the workings of the software. Now, remember, hustlers, this is part of a series, an Aura series. So if you didn't catch part one, it is imperative. If you're serious about growing your business, it's a long video and it is worth every second if you're serious. So if you haven't watched that, go back so that you get your concepts proper and in order. And now what we're going to do is allow the co-founder to actually show us the software so you are actually blessed. If you want to learn something, no better source than the actual inventor. So with that, we're going to turn it right over and learn together. So Dillon, cool. Take it away.
Yeah. All right. So the way I'm going to approach this is we're going to build two strategies together, the two that I recommend, right? And if you watch the previous video, I talked about the oscillation strategy. So we're going to build that. We're also going to build the liquidation strategy. A lot of sellers, when they get started with repricing, they start playing with all the ideas of what they could do, and it becomes overwhelming, right? So repricing can feel overwhelming to begin with. So our task is to simplify it, right? So what we really want to do is look at this from like an 80-20 perspective, right? What's the 20% of the things we should do that's going to yield 80% of the outcomes we want, right? Right now, when you're getting started, you're not worried about all the one-off exceptions, all the what ifs, right? We're worried about like, how do I cover 80+% of my inventory and be good to go, right? And not overwhelm ourselves. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we're going to build this sucker together. So I'm acting as if you just joined. You've got your, so I'm going to move the Zoom guy over here. I'm going to act as if you just joined, you jumped in, you connected your marketplace. Super important. This is our demo account, so we don't have that hooked up here, but that's okay. So we got some listings in here. We're, not as important for our situation, but I'm going to walk you through, end to end, how do we get started? So we're going to jump into strategies. Now, strategies are interesting. I'm going to move us over here as well, because we have some pre-configured. So first, obviously, we're going to hit a create strategy. We're going to choose Amazon as a marketplace. No, we don't currently support eBay or Walmart. I apologize. It's just Amazon.
Okay.
So we'll choose that. Now we have a few pre-figured strategies. What does that mean? It means that we set the settings for you to optimize for a certain outcome, right? So we have, I'll skip this one for a second. We have featured merchants. Basically, it's anybody who is able to be featured, anybody who can be in the buy box. Mm-hmm. We have the lowest overall price, right? So this is going to say, I don't care if it's merchant fulfilled or if it's FBA, hit me with the lowest FBA or the lowest overall price. Mm-hmm. And then you have your custom strategy, which is basically you jump in and nothing's set and you can do whatever the heck you want. Kind of overwhelming. What do I recommend? I recommend starting with the buy box targeting strategy. It's pre-configured, but we're going to make some changes to it, right? Okay. This is like 95% of the way to the oscillation strategy, but it's missing one key thing that I'm going to walk you guys through. The reason why I recommend starting with this almost 9 out of 10 times is because if you forget a setting, it kind of doesn't matter because it's really set the way we would recommend it to be set without this one exception, which we're going to walk through. So listen, there's a lot of settings in here, right? So it can kind of be overwhelming. It's very analytical. It's very logical, right? And so I'm going to walk you. Yeah, right. Exactly. So what we're trying to do with Aura is we're trying to take this very complex technical thing and reduce it down so you don't have to be nerds like us and you can just jump in and get your stuff done, right? So I'm going to recommend you start here.
Okay.
However, for this example, I'm not going to do that. The reason why I'm not is the pre-configured strategies will actually skip the first step, which is the competitor step. I want to show you that because it's very important. You can go back and change it, but we have to save it and all this stuff. So we're just going to jump in here and we're basically going to recreate this guy from scratch. Okay. So we chose this. We're on the first page. The first section here is telling Aura, who do you want to target? We need to know who to look for, right? It's not just competitors. We're looking for a type of competitor. Right. Okay. So we have a few options here. We have like the lowest overall, right? We have lowest FBA, lowest MFN. For our purposes, what we want to do is we want to target the buy box itself. Okay.
Okay.
It really doesn't matter what seller is in there, although we can treat different sellers, differently. So what I mean by that is we can say if it's a merchant fulfilled seller, we might reprice differently than if it's a FBA seller, but we're still targeting the offer in the buy box.
Right.
So why choose that out of all these other options? We choose that because 82 roughly % of organic sales come through the buy box, right? We talked about this in the previous episode. How do we increase sales? We increase the percentage of time we're in the buy box. So then logically speaking, we should probably just target that, right? Like because everything else is irrelevant.
For example, if we chose lowest FBA, that guy may not be controlling the buy box necessarily.
Correct. Yes. And this is a very like new seller kind of, hack, right? So you think, oh, well, Amazon likes a low offer, therefore I want to be the lowest. That's not always the case, right? And we're thinking about our entire inventory, not a one SKU kind of situation, right? So again, we're trying to build something that can work for 80% of our inventory, right? Okay. A single strategy. So yeah, we could definitely go these routes. We have the lowest FBA, then MFN. How does that work? That basically says if there is an FBA seller outside of yourself, we will target the lowest one. The moment there is no other FBA seller on that listing, we will then look for the lowest merchant fulfilled offer. So we can get kind of complex here, but we don't need to, right? Basically, we designed this to where like, if you need it to be complex for a given situation, you can make that happen, but it's not something that you should go to by default. So we're going to choose the buy box itself, right? Okay. Featured sellers only. This is kind of redundant because if we're targeting an offer in the buy box, they have to be featured. We can exclude Amazon as a competitor. I don't recommend doing that. Amazon's a weird thing. I get a lot of questions in regards to how do I reprice against Amazon? My simplistic answer is don't. At the end of the day, listen, it's Amazon's house, right? They play by different rules. I have absolutely seen some listings where you can reprice below by a penny and control the buy box and they won't even reprice. I've seen others where they will basically reprice instantly against you. And the only way to win the buy box is to be $10 below their price. So there's no algorithmic way to say, here's what to do on this situation against Amazon, because it's so different. It's so random in the sense that weird. At least my hypothesis is if they have a ton of inventory in stock, they're going to own it so that they can move it because they have cash being held like we do. If they don't have a whole lot, they're not really worried about it. Then they'll kind of let the market take its pace. So for me, I don't recommend treating Amazon differently. We allow you to. I don't recommend it though, because it's like hit or miss, right?
I've never had them. On every listing I jump on with them, and I do quite a few, they never reprice at all.
That's good.
But it depends on the type of SKU. And like you said, if they have thousands, I mean, I always tell the hustlers, Amazon has nothing to gain by pricing you out so that you leave their marketplace, and they're making money whether they allow you to sell through yours or not.
So like with wholesale, which is my experience and background, you can see that they might have like 4,000 units, right? And it's like, no, they're going to own that, right? So it's like, it depends, right? And I've had sellers say exactly what you say. And then I've had other sellers be like, no, dude, I can never beat them. And like, they always, beat me up on listings. So it's like, which is right? Both. It just depends. Okay. So we got that. Right now we don't have exclude, or include sellers by their seller ID. Basically, the idea here is we would allow you to say, hey, this one seller just does some crazy funky stuff. Just don't even look at them, ignore them. Not quite there yet. So exclude sellers by their feedback rating. This one's pretty interesting. A lot of what I used to recommend has changed because of COVID, right? We've seen the market and the algorithm change slightly. And I'm referencing mainly merchant fulfilled offers.
Yes.
Now, here's the thing. A lot of this becomes redundant the moment we choose the buy box, right? If I'm saying the lowest FBA, now I need to start thinking of, okay, but in what cases do I want to exclude, right? I might say, give me the lowest FBA seller that has a 90% plus feedback rating. Therefore, I might get rid of the bottom 10, right? That's definitely feasible. For our purposes, again, we're trying to make this super simple. We're not going to worry about it. It's literally irrelevant.
Right.
Because if they're in the buy box,
yeah,
listen, if they have a 45% feedback rating and they're in the buy box, you still want the buybacks, right? Like it doesn't matter, right? Exclude back order sellers. Again, we're targeting the buy box. We're not worried about that here. Exclude competition by handling time. This is kind of, trying to exclude merchant fulfilled offers that could be in the buy box. Again, they're in the buy box. who cares? I take a very simplistic approach to this. A lot of sellers have this like massive algorithm in their head that they're trying to optimize for. And listen, that's fantastic if you want to get to that degree, but I'm telling you, getting started, just get the buy box. That's your singular task.
If I could just say though, real quick, I love the fact that you allow for us to become as granular as we want, because some people, they're not happy unless they're controlling each and every, I love that.
Yeah. And listen, at a certain point, you do get there and you do need to have those conversations. Okay. Because again, what we're building right now are two strategies to handle 80% of our inventory. That means that there's another 20% that kind of are the exceptions. Now, typically what I see with what those exceptions are typically comes down to like minimums, like your ROI and stuff like that, which we'll walk through, right? So a lot of times it's the same strategy. I'm just willing to go down a little bit more, or I'm not willing to go down as much, right? Okay. So there's not as much variance as you would expect. Now, there are one-off situations that it's just a very weird like situation. Like every SKU, every listing kind of is its own mini economy, if you will, right? So it plays by different rules. Right. Sometimes those are so odd, we just have to build crazy strategies for that one SKU. But again, that comes later, right? Okay. So, if you're using or selling used items, you can kind of say, hey, I don't care about the condition, or it's got to be my condition or better, right? Again, kind of more granular. I'm assuming right now that most sellers are going to be new. Yes. So we're kind of going to leave that alone for the time being. It's a simple setting though. Okay. So this is basically how the pre-configured buy box targeting strategy would look like, but we would have skipped this step, right? So I wanted to walk through and get you to understand. And here's what's going to happen. This is paramount to everything else I'm about to do. Moving forward, and I'll remind us as we go through, whenever we read the term competition, we're going to replace that term with our competition type, which for our purposes right now is the buy box. It's going to add a lot of clarity. Okay, so let's go to the next setting. This is actually where we tell Aura, here's how I want you to reprice. Okay, so what do we want to do? We talked in the last episode about the oscillation strategy. In order to increase the volume of sales, we need to be in the buy box more. How do we get in the buy box more? Have a better offer. That's just how Amazon works, right? So we're going to reprice below by a penny. Now, this is where you can say, hey, I want to reprice differently if it's merchant fulfilled versus FBA. If I want to do that, I can enable this section here. And I can say, I want to match the price for, prime sellers, FBA and SFP. Prime, it's the same thing. Amazon doesn't treat SFP differently than, or self-fulfilled prime differently than, regular FBA. Mm-hmm. Then the moment I enable this top section now works for merchant fulfilled.
Okay.
So that's how we're able to kind of separate the two if we want. Again, I don't think you really need to. Prior to COVID, I would say, yes, you should absolutely reprice above merchant fulfilled offers in the buy box, no more than 2%. I've seen that kind of dwindle. The reason for that is, one, shipping times have gotten so much better for merchant fulfilled sellers. They've really figured out the logistics of it. Mm-hmm. So now you don't have this situation where a merchant fulfilled offer is necessarily worse. A lot of times, yeah, it's not FBA, but I'm getting it in 2 days no matter what, and I'm still getting a great price. So customers don't really care as much. Like, it's nice, don't get me wrong. Obviously, books are a completely different thing because a book might arrive in like 2 weeks, who knows? Mm-hmm. But for your mainstream listings, it's not that big of a deal. If you want to play with it, absolutely do, right? So let's say we want to get a little bit more granular. I'm going to say we're going to reprice below prime sellers by a penny. And I'm going to price above by, let's do a percentage here. Let's go 0.5%. Not a ton, but I'm trying to ink out a little bit as much as I can, right? Okay. Now, here's the thing. This is not as important as you might think. Let me explain. The maintenance section, which is the next section, is basically a strategy within your strategy that states, when I am in the buy box, I need to do something new, or I don't. You can kind of set it that way as well. And what we typically recommend is you take your price up. Now, how does it do that? It states that if you are the lowest FBA offer on a listing and in the buy box, raise your price. That's the way we're gonna set it. You can say go down if you want to be very competitive as well. And we'll talk about that in the liquidation strategy. For us, though, we just want to say, listen, if I'm the lowest FBA offer, I want to make sure that I'm as close as I can to the next lowest, right? Therefore, even if I'm matching a merchant fulfilled offer, I'm in the buy box, or it doesn't say, hey, look at the next merchant fulfilled offer and then raise it to them. Because there's so much variance in terms of how merchant fulfilled offers are priced, it didn't really make sense to design it that way, right? Because you might be at the buy box at 25, the next lowest MFN might be $80, right? Because they're just hoping that they sell it because it's sitting in the garage, right? So they don't really care. So we decided, hey, let's only look at FBA offers, right? These are the ones that have a lot of movement that we need to be kind of aware of, like actual competition. So in this case, if we were to match, we would naturally pull the buy box, then we could, increase that buy box up in theory. So less important, but if you want to be more granular, you absolutely can. So we'll leave it that way. Again, for Amazon, I don't treat them any different. They're just going to get wrapped up in FBA right here.
Okay.
Because again, it's one-off kind of situations. Okay. Now, typically when we are not targeting the buy box itself, this section will read when there is no competition. So let's replace the word again, competition, with our competition type, which is the buy box. This really reads when there is no buy box.
This is important.
In other words, it's suppressed.
Does happen.
Yes, which means it's suppressed, right? This actually wasn't built by, this wasn't designed. We just realized logically, oh, we can actually handle suppressed buy boxes. This is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So listen, it does happen, right? Especially if you're doing this oscillation strategy where you're taking your price up to a max price, and we'll talk about how to effectively set those in a bit. It can happen. So that does not necessarily mean that you need to, do all these things yourself, blah, blah, blah. No, just let Aura handle it for you. So the way we've found to work best is to say, whenever it's suppressed, take my current price and lower it by 2 pennies. And this will happen every 2 to 3 minutes until one of two things happen. Either one, I reactivate the buy box, in which case we just go back to repricing the way we have been. Or two, I reach my minimum price. If that happens, we'll jump down here, right? When your price reaches your min price. And we're going to change this in a moment to max price to complete the oscillation.
Yes.
And then it's just going to loop. So worst case scenario, we never unsuppress it, because this is possible, right? Let's say that you just set your min max a little too high, and Amazon just like, hey, dude, we think that's too high. We're not going to unsuppress it unless you go lower. So what's going to happen? You're going to go up and down. Is that great? No. Is it bad? Not necessarily. Why? The reason for that is we've seen that having price activity on a listing can increase sales. We've tested it before. It's not much. It's like max 1%. But we have seen the test we ran was there is no other seller on a listing. It was a private label seller we wanted to test this with, right? And we said, just increase the price every 3 hours and then bring it right back. 1 penny. It's not even big, right? It's just enough activity on the listing and we increase sales. Not a lot. Again, like max 1%, right? So not a big deal, but that goes to show that having some price activity is better than not. So worst case, we're kind of good here.
Without going too deep, because this is a little bit off topic, but can you unpack why does Amazon suppress buy boxes? Is it just because they don't like the price for their customers?
Yeah, as far as I understand it, their algorithm kind of dictates what a affordable or a good price range is. And the moment you're outside of that, they get rid of it. I believe comes back to that. Go ahead.
No, what I was going to say, if you have multiple people on a listing and Amazon is aware that we're trying to control the buy box, they don't like where the price is across those sellers. So basically they're saying, hey guys, we're taking away the buy box. The buy box is an experience where the customer just clicks add to cart and they never have to choose. So Amazon essentially punishes us and says, hey, we're going to make it more difficult, because every additional click that a customer has to make, every additional choice is a chance that they won't make a decision at all. But when there's, like you said, if you're working with a private label and he's the only guy on the listing, how's that really hurting the seller? Because if the buyer wants the product, whether it's a buy box experience or not, he's essentially the only guy.
So in that situation, that was not suppressed. We just wanted to test if like consistent pricing activity, like holding all else equals, would have some kind of effect.
Okay.
And we proved that it did. So then we took that outcome and said, okay, well, assuming that's true with all other listings, then if it is suppressed, you want to have that at the very minimum. So kind of two different situations, but we use that as a test to kind of come to that outcome.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
so
didn't want to get off topic, but
oh yeah, no, you're good. You're good. Yeah, you're good. So there's a lot going on there, right? So, and you brought up something that I want to highlight, which is sales dramatically decrease when your listings are suppressed. I've talked to a number of sellers that are like, oh, it's suppressed. I'm like, cool, it's unsuppressed. They're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Yes, it is. Even if you have one unit, it absolutely is. If you have 82% of organic sales coming through the buy box and you take that away, that's not a lot. And especially if you have like 10 other competitors, that means that a fraction of the people that could be buying from you are now having to look at all the sellers on that list.
How are they choosing?
Right. And how are they choosing? The lowest price, right? So for us, unsuppress it. It's always worth it. And I've had sellers be like, oh, well, I can get more money because I have a higher price. Okay, let's jump back to the previous episode about opportunity costs. You holding that unit for an extra 4 weeks to ink out an extra 40% ROI is not necessarily worth it. Right. So we need to be thinking, again, this is like a churn equation, right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a strategy that moves inventory at a effective pace, meaning as quickly as possible, while making us as much as we can while moving as quickly as possible. Right. Okay. So we want as much volume as we can, but we also want as much net profit as we can. Right.
Absolutely.
And that's what the oscillation strategy is trying to do. Okay. So let's jump to the bottom 3 sections here. Again, we're going to replace the word competition with your buy box, or I'm sorry, with your competition type, which is the buy box for us. So this reads when the buy box is below your min price. For both this and when the buy box matches your min price, I leave those at my min.
Okay.
Here's how we complete the oscillation strategy. We say when your price reaches your min price, go to your max price.
Gotcha.
So what's happening here? 2 major settings make the oscillation strategy work. The first one is pricing below by penny. That's your volume increaser, if you will, excuse me. And then you say when your price reaches your min price, you go to your max price. That is attempting to average out or increase the average net profit per unit. Okay. Super important. Super important when you go deep into a SKU, right? You got hundreds, dozens of units. This is very, very important. We want to be able to move that inventory as quickly as possible, but not give up so much net profitability that it wasn't necessarily worth it, right? I'm not trying to go ahead.
Can you go back up to the top? I just want to make sure that we don't miss something where it says price differently against prime sellers, FBA and SFP. If you have that disabled, then when you disable that, then you're no longer using the area above that, right?
So we are using this. So now basically when both of these are disabled, this top section applies to any offer.
I got you. Okay.
So it's basically the way this starts is this applies to everyone.
Got you. And
I do this. This says, okay, well, this is for prime. This is for non-prime. And then if I do this, this says this is for Amazon. This is for prime, not Amazon. This is for merchant fulfilled. Right? So we can, again, we can get more granular if we need to.
Okay.
I personally don't like to get super granular. I don't think it's really necessary. So like the way I would personally set this is just that right there.
Right. And you would have those disabled.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Right. Nice and simple. Use max price when out of stock, not as important when you're OARA, right? If you got replenishable kind of stuff, like, a lot of my SKUs with wholesale, I had 12 SKUs that did the bulk of my sales. I would replenish those every week and a half to 2 weeks, right? So I would want this to kind of reset. And we'll talk about a more effective way of doing that with workflows in the next video. So I'm going to skip that for right now.
What is that saying? Use max price when out of stock. That's saying that when you go out of stock,
throw your price up. Exactly.
Throw it up. And then when you come back in, it would start.
It'll kind of take over. Exactly. Okay. But we're going to talk about a more effective method here in a minute. Okay. So the maintenance section, we kind of glossed over this, but this is super important. For the oscillation strategy, this is exactly what I recommend you do. Now let's talk about what it's not going to do. This is not going to say when you're in the buy box, raise your price by a penny until you get kicked out. I've had so many sellers be like, yo, can you just do that? It sounds great in theory. How does that work in reality? What ends up happening is you get the buy box at 25 bucks. You start to raise the price by a penny. And then let's say you get to 30 bucks.
Okay.
Heck, let's say you get to 35, right? So you started at 25 in the buy box. We raised you to 35. The minute you got to 35.01, you suppress the buy box.
Uh-oh.
So what do we do now? Assuming another seller pulled the buy box. No, we suppress it. That's the example. Okay. We suppress it. Okay, so we're going to start lowering your price by 2 pennies, the way we currently set the pursuit section, until you reactivate it. But here's the interesting thing. You may not actually reactivate it at 25. You may reactivate it at 24.50. Right? So you could have had the buy box and getting sales at 25, but now you got it at 24.50.
You got
so
cute
it seems
and it
like
cost you.
Correct, right? So just because you went out at 35.01 does not necessarily mean you're going to reactivate it at 35. Excuse me. That can be the case, but it's not always the case. When we're designing repricing from a systems perspective, right? We have to make opinionated decisions in how we build things. Okay. We have to look at not just the exceptional situations, right? Not like, oh, well, it can do that and it does do that. It's how often, right? If it's not 90% plus of the time, well, we can't really effectively make that decision, right? We need to make a better decision. So we decided, at what point can you raise your price while limiting the amount of times you suppress the buy box? Here's how that works. If you're at 25 bucks, again, in the buy box, there's another seller at, let's say, 30 bucks. What the current setting will do is it will raise your price to within this value of the next lowest seller. So we keep this at 1 penny. So if we're at 25, the next lowest seller, let's say, is at 30, this setting will take us to 29.99.
Aha, so that we don't trigger
Correct.
A suppress, but yet we still gain some profit. Okay.
So here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do a few things in this situation, right? I'm trying to recoup more profits, which is nice. I'm trying to not share the buy box, which hence the penny, right? Because if I go to 35, now we're just sharing it. I'm giving up volume. That's not really good. And we know, economically speaking, if I raise my price, I'm going to have a lower volume of sales to begin with. This is something sellers never really think about, right? They're like, oh, let me take it from 45 to 60. Okay. But economically speaking, you are going to lower the volume. So we got to think about these kind of things, right? The third thing is we're not suppressing the buy box, right? Can it happen? Sure. On average, it does not. And we're going to talk about how to really avoid suppressing buy boxes in the next section with your mins and your maxes. But assuming you have your maxes set appropriately, and I don't believe in having super wide ranges, they actually should be kind of tight. Okay. What we want to do is we want to say, raise it to the next lowest FBA so that Amazon sees there's a group of FBA sellers here that's still in a good range. Therefore, not that big of a deal. Don't suppress it.
Okay.
That's the outcome we want here. So it seems very simplistic, but we're really doing 3 major things that I just talked about. Now, if we want to be super aggressive, we can absolutely say, hey, lower and raise it. So if there's an FBA seller below you, lower it if you want to be more aggressive. You could say, don't do anything. Like literally don't touch my price if I'm in the buy box. The moment you get kicked out, we go back to repricing, right?
Okay.
So there's a lot of options here, right? If we're targeting the lowest FBA seller, I might say, I don't care if I'm in the buy box. So actually get rid of this. I basically want to act as if I don't have the buy box and the buy box doesn't exist. So
but again, in most cases, what would you suggest?
This right here.
Raise price.
This right here.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely. So again, there's a lot of settings you can choose, but I'm going to give you the ones that I see work 9 out of 10 times.
Yes.
Okay. Mins and maxes. This is an interesting one. I'm the guy who wants to automate his entire life. So let's talk about saving some time. Setting your minimum prices automatically just makes sense. There's no situation where it does not make sense that I've seen. Typically, this is done via ROI. So you might say at minimum, I want 20%.
Yes.
Here's the thing. Sellers set this far too high. This is at minimum. You're not setting your average that you want. If I set this to 0% ROI, that does not mean that I'm getting 0% ROI. The buy box might be hovering around 30%.
And
I'm
you're
just willing to
targeting
go
the buy
down there.
box. I
Correct.
got you.
I'm willing to go that low if I need to. So for sellers, don't look at what you want to average. Look at the minimum, the actual minimum that you would be willing to take and be okay with.
Okay.
For a lot of sellers, especially OARA, 10% is what I say.
Okay.
A lot of sellers are like, oh my gosh, that's so low. It's really not, right? Listen,
I'm glad you said that, because mine is set at 20%.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what I'm going to end up getting.
Correct.
I'm targeting the buy box.
Yes, so. Exactly. And it comes down to your buying, right? So if you're setting it at 30%, but your buying is so incredible, yeah, that's probably fine, right? Your minimums are relative to you and your buy costs, right? So if you're kind of getting new and you're still trying to figure out how to maximize your cost, I would go lower with this value, because the likelihood that you overpaid a little bit is probably high, and that's okay. You just need to account for that, because otherwise you end up having the buy box right beneath your min. And it's like, you're so fixated on getting 20% that you don't realize you could get 18% right now.
Exactly.
That's right. And so, point. Right. So when I'm scanning through sellers' listings, I'm looking at where's the buy box relative to their min price. Mm-hmm. That's a problem, right? So I've seen it where the buy box is at 25, the min price is automatically set to 30. And they're like, well, I just don't want to give it up. I'm like, well, to be honest, the market doesn't care what you want to sell it for. The market's going to tell you what it's willing to buy it for. And you can decide if you want to sell it or not.
I love this, because you just changed the way we look at ROI. A lot of times we come in fixated on ROI, and we say, my minimum is 20% and I'm not going any lower. Yeah. And the minute you do that, you just excluded a profit that you could have made.
Correct.
Even if it was just a couple points below. It's more important to keep things flowing.
Yeah. So the important part here is to shift your perspective from, I control ROI when I sell it. You don't. You basically make concrete your ROI when you buy it, because you can't change your buy costs, right? And you also cannot control what the market's willing to pay you.
True.
But here's what you can do is you can get really good at your buy costs, right? So once you buy it, it's like, it's locked in, right? You can't be like, well, I paid 20. I want to change that to paying 50. You can't do it. But you could have done that before you purchased it, right? And this is when I talk about being good at sourcing, this is kind of what I'm talking about.
I see.
When you get to that point, whatever the market's at is kind of irrelevant, because you're good, right? A lot of sellers think, well, to increase my average ROI for all my inventory and my sales, I need higher, sell prices. No, you don't. You need lower buy costs.
You need lower buy costs.
The thing you can influence, right? We got to invert that a bit.
Around.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's talk about something interesting here. So I mentioned that, I want to automate everything, not ever at the exclusion of effectiveness. So I used to believe, hey, you should automatically set your mins and your maxes. Through enough data, I don't agree with that anymore.
Okay.
Your min prices are relative to your cost. They're specific to you, right? So you set those, and you should automatically set those, because it's going to save you a ton of time. Or it requires 3 major things before it will actually reprice a listing. The listing has to have a strategy assigned to it. Mm-hmm. Repricing has to be toggled on for that listing, and it requires at least a minimum price. If there is no minimum price, technically it is 0, and we don't allow that. We're trying to protect sellers, right? So you can do all that. And if you don't have a min price, we're not going to touch it, because we're not taking your price to 0. So if you got those 3 things, you're good, but we do need a max price to take you to 1, right? Okay, your max price has nothing to do with your price. The max price is relative to the listing and the product itself.
Okay.
I've had sellers be like, oh, well, I'm willing to accept at minimum 10% ROI, but maximum, I'm just going to set that to 1,000%, because I want people to be able to pay me whatever they can, right? That doesn't work. It sounds great in theory, but again, it does not work. Why? If you're going to your max price, you just took a $20 buy box to $800. Mm-hmm. There is no added value in doing that. And I'm sorry, nobody is paying you $100 for a $20 item.
Correct.
It sounds great in theory, and it's wishful thinking, but it will not happen. It never happens in reality, right? So we need to think about these things. So how do you do that then? Well, we're going to leave this value blank, and we're going to manually set these. Yes, manually set your max prices for your listings. Why? I can't look at the buy box and tell you what's appropriate. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go listing by listing, and it's not super time consuming. And you can honestly have a VA do this if you want. And you say,
or you can do it while you're creating the listing in Aura is
yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
not in Aura, in a inventory lab is
you can. So I don't recommend you do it there.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
I do not recommend that you put min or max prices in Seller Central. Inventory Lab's totally fine.
Okay.
Do not have them shipped over to Seller Central. It's going to cause you a ton of problems in terms of the high pricing errors.
Okay.
It's going to be an issue because we can't see each other's. So if it's set at $40 in Aura and 35 in Seller Central, Aura goes, I can go to 40 and it'll do it. And then Seller Central goes, that's above 35, lock it down.
Okay.
Not good, right? So what I recommend doing is you want a healthy range. A lot of people think that having a wide range with your min maxes, especially with the oscillation strategy, is good. It's not. It's actually the inverse. Okay. So the lower the dollar amount for your buy box, the tighter that range in terms of dollars needs to be. So if the buy box is $15, I might only have a $3 difference between my min and my max price.
Okay, that's about what I do.
Right. And so, why that small of a range? The reason for that is there's a bunch of pricing sensitivity issues. When I take a price from $15 to $18, that's a larger percentage increase in the price. If I take it from 15 to 25, it's like, that's a big deal. Yeah. But if I took a buy box, let's say, so one of my wholesale items I used to sell retailed at $325. So if I take it from $325 to $350, it's still kind of like a big range, but it's realistic. Somebody would pay that, right? Because that percentage increase is not that big of a deal. So basically, the lower the buy box price, the tighter the range, the larger the buy box price, the wider the range. That's the way I'm approaching this. And it's, I'm just kind of looking at and just throwing those in manually as I'm going, and we're good to go, right? So I'm not going to suppress the buy box. I'm not taking my price to this ridiculous situation, because part of what we want with the oscillation strategy is for when we go to our max price, that the competition follows us up and we reset the buy box entirely. If I take it from 25 to 60, nobody's following me up, right? Like they're like, you're not getting sales. I own the buy box now, right? But if I take it from 25 to 28, they're like, I'd rather get 28 than 25, and they jump up, and we start this process all over again. So a lot of what's interesting about repricing is it's kind of counterintuitive. But if you can get past that and really just understand what I'm saying, it's super simple. You have to just like basically take what I'm saying and be like, I believe you, and then like move forward with it. Otherwise you end up basically taking your strategy and building it in such a way that it works against you, not for you.
As I'm looking at the screen and I see the pre-workout there.
Yeah.
This is basically just a visual to give us an example.
Yeah.
The min price that we're looking at, that $23.34, the system set that based on the buy cost, right?
Exactly.
And
so we're saying
you have to enter your max.
Yeah. Yes, that's correct. So basically the way we're going to calculate your min price is we're going to say, what value do you want? And what did you tell us you paid for, which we should be able to import automatically from Inventory Lab if you have that.
Yes.
Then we'll look at the listing fees, and then we'll say, okay, based on all that, and you want a 10% minimum ROI, that's what we're going to give it for the value.
Gotcha.
And that will dynamically change. So if the fees change or you change your buy cost for whatever reason, that will automatically update and move forward. So that's the upside, right? Let's say you set this at 20% and you come back and you're like, actually,
and now we can see
said 10%.
Yeah.
I think 10% makes more sense. Do you want to go manually one by one? Or do you want to jump into your strategy and go, let me change the 2 to a 1, hit save, let Aura update, and move on with your life? That took 2 clicks versus going listing by listing.
Yeah,
but your max prices really didn't need a change. Your max prices are pretty much held constant, right? Because it's not specific to you and your strategy. It's specific to the listing.
Gotcha.
So this is where like I'm saving time, but I'm trying to be very effective at the same time, right? We talked about being, efficiently ineffective. What I want us to be is efficiently effective.
Yes.
Or effectively efficient, depending on how you want to look at it, right?
All right.
So we go to review. This just gives you a brief overview of like kind of what's going on here. Let's talk about naming. A lot of people, and we kind of joke about this, right? Buy box dominator 5,000. I don't recommend doing something like that. What I really recommend is for you to include in the name of the strategy what the strategy will do. Yes. So here's how I do it. I go section by section. Who am I targeting, right? I'm targeting the buy box. Okay. And then what am I doing? Well, I'm doing the oscillation strategy. Now I could say reprice below by a penny, raise to max, right? I can do that. but I already know fundamentally how the oscillation strategy works. I know that's going to go up and down. So I'm just going to say, I'm just going to shorten it up, right? We're doing the oscillation strategy. In the maintenance section, we're trying to maximize our profits. So we go max ROI. That's what we're going to do. And then how am I setting my mins automatically and my maxes? Kind of important. So I'm going to say min, we're doing 10%. And then max, we're doing that manually.
Okay.
So why am I doing that? When you were assigning this to a, let's say you got 3 strategies and you're assigning this to a listing, you don't want to have to remember everything that's inside of it. You want to be able to read it and be like, oh, I want this way. Because here's what's interesting. What if you have 2 strategies and there's a difference, and the only difference is that you have one strategy that's automatically set at 10 and one for 2, or I'm sorry, 20. Well, how do you know which is which? Well, we make it this way. So I can basically read the title and be like, oh, that's what's in that one. Click that and move on with my life. Make it nice and easy.
Yeah, I named mine buy box 10, buy box 15.
Everybody does it. I know. Now the liquidation strategy is going to be different. I do name that one differently, and I'll explain why. Okay, so that's it. That's literally the strategy. Now, one nice hack, I like to put emojis in here because we're visual people, right? Most people can see an image and know what to associate with more so than reading it. So if this is my default go-to strategy, I might say rocket, right? I know when I'm looking at it, let's create it here. We get a little bit of confetti. I don't need to even read this whole thing if I don't want to. I can just be like, oh, it's that. That's my default, right?
Yeah.
Or if we want to get, even more simplistic with it, let's say you always start with this one. We're just going to do, where's the other one? I guess it's not here. That's all right. Just do one.
Where are you
That's
getting
the one
those
we start
emojis?
With. What's that?
Where are you getting those emojis and stuff?
So on a Mac, if you do Control-Command-Space, it'll bring them up.
Oh, okay. That's for Mac, man.
Yeah. Nice hack. So this is number 1. So I just know for every new listing, I assign number 1.
Gotcha.
Now we're going to quickly, just for time, create the liquidation strategy. Okay. And it's super simple. So for the liquidation strategy, I'm going to start with that buy box targeting strategy, like we mentioned. I'm not going to change anything, actually, except for one thing. I'm going to say when I'm at my min price, keep me at my min price. Why? I'm not worried about maximizing profits right now. I want my capital back.
Gotcha.
Okay. And then I'm going to say, I want to be aggressive, even when I'm in the buy box, lower and raise. If there's a better offer than me, drop it down. It's all good. We still have our mins and maxes though, right? And then what I'm going to say is for my ROI, 0%, break even, capital. So cost plus fees, I want to cover those. I just want my capital back. If I spent $20 to buy that thing, I want 20 back at minimum. Then this is one where I typically name it slightly different. So let's look at fire is what I usually put for these. It's like a liquidation, right?
Yeah, fire sale, whatever.
Liquidation, let's just do something like retrieve. I can't spell it today. Retrieve capital.
Gotcha.
So you see how once you understand how these strategies work, how quickly you can jump in and make a tweak, and now it's a completely different thing, right? I only changed like 2, maybe 3 things, right? That's the only difference here. But they are fundamentally working different.
Absolutely.
So when we talk about what strategies do I need to get started, these 2. You need your default one. That's going to handle, again, 80% of your inventory. When inventory has been sitting around a little too long, or the buy box has actually tanked, right? You bought it at 25. Now the buy box is at 25. So you're losing money. Sorry, go ahead and liquidate that sucker. Right. So we've designed it in a way that as you're looking through your listings, you're like, oh, I need to do something here. Don't manually do it. Switch the strategy and let Aura take it.
And let Aura take it from there. I love that.
Right. You did one thing, and basically what you're doing is you're saying, I have a few tasks, which are my listings. And then you're saying what task needs to be completed here. If it's, I need to lower my price and move it more quickly. Well, don't actually do that. Have a strategy that does that for you. Update the strategy, push it back out into the ether, if you will, and move on with your life.
I love the fact that
That's what we want.
this is the first time I thought about a liquidation strategy.
I know nobody wants to build them, man.
No, that's part of business, having to liquidate.
Yes.
That
I know.
If it happens with Target, Walmart, Best Buy, it's going to happen with you. I mean, a lot of times it's funny to me how we go into business thinking that we're not going to have the similar
we're special.
Of these big,
we're never going to lose money, and then you lose $2,000 on your first wholesale pallet because you didn't look at it right.
You just walked in. Why did you think? Why does Walmart have a clearance section?
Yeah,
somebody made a purchase and it didn't.
You might need one too. Exactly. So that's strategies. That is it. So at this point in your onboarding, if you will, you've already connected your marketplace, which is pretty simple. And if you need help doing that, we obviously have like a video and a help desk article. We can't do that for you, unfortunately, because that's a security thing. But you connect that while your listings are importing, and that can take anywhere from 15 to 2 hours, depending on how many you have, right? If you've got like hundreds of thousands of listings, it might take an hour or so. But while that's happening, make a cup of coffee, create your first 2 strategies. And by the time your listings are here, you're ready to go. And then in the next video, we're going to talk about using workflows to take the work you still have left to do and give those tasks to Aura to do for you.